He promised we'd build a life together, but instead, he built a mountain of debt by draining our savings to buy gifts for his sister. When I found out, I didn't just pack my bags, I took everything and walked away. What followed wasn't just a breakup, it was my awakening. My name is Lena Adams. I never thought much of names. A name is just a label, an easy way to identify someone in a room full of strangers. But lately, I've been wondering about mine. It feels too soft, too kind for the person I've become. The woman who is now learning to take back control of everything that's been taken from me. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I'd have told you my life was as perfect as it gets. Married to Mark, a man who charmed me with his easy smile and warmth, I felt like I had it all. Financial security, a supportive partner, a future we'd carefully planned together. We had one of those joint accounts that people talk about, the kind that symbolizes trust, unity, and shared dreams. At least, that's how I thought of it at the time. We met when I was still in my 20s, ambitious and determined, yet somehow still wrapped up in the belief that love could fix everything. Mark was charming, easygoing, and full of promises. He seemed like everything I needed. Someone to take care of me, someone who could make decisions without hesitation, someone who knew what they wanted from life. We'd always been a team. From buying our first home together to planning our future, everything was a partnership. But like everything else, the facade of perfection was starting to crack. At first, I didn't notice it. Little things, a text here, a phone call there, but it was easy to dismiss. After all, family is important, right? It wasn't unusual for Mark to spend a lot of time with his sister Megan. She'd always been the center of his family's world, the golden child. Mark loved her, of course. She was his sister, and he'd do anything for her. I never minded at first. I understood, but the more time passed, the more I began to notice the imbalance. I'd be at home, catching up on work, paying the bills, managing our lives while Mark was out running errands for Megan, helping her with anything and everything. It started small, a new coat for her, a dinner at an expensive restaurant. I didn't mind those little things. I knew they had a close bond. But slowly, things began to change. And when I say change, I mean it in the most insidious way. Mark wasn't just running errands for Megan anymore. He was going above and beyond, like he had something to prove. I remember the first time I saw the charge for a shopping spree, several $1,000s, all on our joint account. The excuse. Megan had needed new clothes for a wedding she was attending. I didn't think much of it at first. I thought maybe it was a one-off thing, an overzealous attempt to be the best brother he could be. I didn't want to be the kind of wife who criticized or made a fuss about family matters. But when the charges kept coming, big-ticket items for vacations, luxury spa days, extravagant gifts, I began to wonder if there was something I was missing. I confronted Mark about it one evening, after I found the latest receipts hidden in the drawer. His face turned red when I mentioned it, his voice defensively rising. "She's my sister, Lena. She's had a rough time, you know that. She doesn't ask for much, and I want to be there for her." That night, I tried to understand. Family. I told myself that's what it was. It was just family. But deep down, something started to feel off. Why was I having to question my own husband's financial decisions? Why did it feel like he was putting Megan's needs above our own future, above our own goals? We'd been talking about buying a bigger house, securing our future, planning for kids. But all of that was slipping through my fingers, quietly and without my noticing. My hard work, my career, my long hours, they meant nothing when Mark was so focused on what his sister wanted. As I sat there in silence, watching him brush off the growing tension, I began to feel something I hadn't felt before, a creeping resentment. I had worked too hard to let my life, my future, be thrown away for someone else's whims. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. Our joint account was no longer a shared investment in our future. It had become Megan's personal funding system. Mark wasn't just being helpful, he was enabling her, letting her drain us dry without a second thought. But I wasn't about to sit back and let this continue. Not anymore. I had built my life from the ground up, and I wasn't going to let Mark or his sister destroy everything I'd worked so hard for. I didn't want to believe it at first. I didn't want to accept that I had married a man who could so easily turn his back on our life for someone who had done nothing but take. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. It wasn't just money, it was my sense of trust, my sense of security, my dignity. All of it had been slowly chipped away bit by Mark's blind loyalty to his sister, and it was time to make a decision. It wasn't an easy decision to make, leaving everything behind, especially when I had invested so much of myself in Mark, in us. But the more I thought about it, the clearer the truth became. I was in a marriage with someone who didn't value me the way I thought he did. I wasn't just a partner anymore. I was an afterthought, a convenient accessory in a life that revolved entirely around Megan and whatever she demanded. The moment I realized I had to act was when Mark came home late one night, his eyes bloodshot, his voice apologetic but hollow. He'd been out with Megan again, and it was becoming a familiar pattern. I'd been up, waiting for him, sitting in the dim light of the living room, the glow of my phone reflecting in my tired eyes. The bills were scattered across the coffee table, all marked with late fees. My mind kept replaying the numbers, the way the charges for Megan's shopping spree seemed to increase each month, the payments for her vacations, the constant cash flow that was never redirected back into our life. Mark stood in the doorway, looking guilty but also defensive, the way someone does when they know they've been caught but don't want to face the full weight of their actions. "I'm sorry, Lena," he said, avoiding eye contact. "I was trying to help Megan. You know she's been struggling lately. She needed that trip, needed to get away from everything. You know how it is." I shook my head, standing up from the couch, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "I don't know how it is, Mark. I don't know how it is that you can justify emptying our savings for her when we've been talking about building our future. You promised me a life together, a future, but now I'm just watching it slip away." His expression faltered for a moment, but then he took a step toward me, reaching for my hand. "It's not like that, Lena. You're overreacting. Megan is not my responsibility, Mark." I cut him off, the words coming out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. "You're married to me, not her. This is our life, our future, not hers. You can't keep sacrificing everything for her and expect me to just stay silent." There was a long silence between us as I watched the confusion and defensiveness in his eyes shift into something else. Regret, maybe? But it was too little. Too late. He took a deep breath, his voice quieter now. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, Lena. I'm just trying to help her. She's been there for me and she needs me." "I need you too, Mark," I said softly, my voice breaking. "But I can't keep standing by while you drain everything we've worked for. I can't keep being second to her." For the first time, I saw a flicker of realization in his eyes, but it was fleeting, quickly replaced by something else. A distant look, as if he was already trying to find a way to justify his actions again. I didn't want to argue anymore. I was done trying to make him see the truth that had been glaring at me for months. "I'm sorry, Lena," he said quietly, his voice small, almost apologetic. But that apology felt like empty air, like a flimsy cover for the truth I had already discovered. His words didn't matter anymore. I had made my decision. I had to do what was best for me, what was best for my future. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of Megan's endless demands, being ignored and belittled by the one person I should have been able to trust. I had spent enough time pretending that things would change, waiting for a miracle that was never going to come. I was no longer the dutiful wife, patiently waiting for him to realize the damage he was doing. I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was myself, and I needed to reclaim my life. That night, after Mark had gone to bed, I stayed up, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the numbers dancing across the screen. I checked our joint account one more time, just to be sure. The transactions were still there. Every purchase, every withdrawal, every promise he made to his sister. I couldn't breathe as I stared at the balance, the final straw. Mark had drained the account again, this time without even telling me. It was the last of our savings, the money we had set aside for our future. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't just about leaving Mark, it was about taking control of my life again. I had spent too many years putting his needs, his family's needs, above my own. I had allowed myself to be buried under a mountain of responsibility, guilt, and frustration. It wasn't just the money. It was the feeling of being invisible, of being second in my own marriage. The next morning I woke early, my mind made up. As Mark was still sleeping, I quietly got out of bed and began packing a bag. I didn't know where I would go, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay here any longer. I wasn't just leaving Mark, I was leaving the idea of who I had thought we were. I was leaving the version of myself that had allowed this to happen. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be smooth, but it was the only choice left. By the time Mark woke up, I was gone. The only thing left behind was a note, a simple message that read, "I'm taking everything. I need to find myself again. I can't keep living this way. Don't try to find me." And with that, I walked away from everything. The sound of the front door clicking shut behind me felt final, like the last chapter of a book I'd been reading for years, one that had long since stopped being a story worth finishing. I didn't look back, not even once. I couldn't afford to. If I let myself look, if I let myself wonder if Mark was going to follow, if I allowed any part of myself to feel guilty, then I would never be able to walk away. And I had to. There was no other choice anymore. I had no idea where I was going. All I knew was that I needed to get out. I needed space to breathe, to think, to reassemble the fragments of myself that had been scattered in the wake of Mark's obsession with his sister, his family, and whatever warped version of reality he had created. I couldn't be a part of it anymore. And in that moment, I wasn't sure if I was running from him, from them, or from the woman I had become by allowing this situation to drag on for so long. I drove for hours. It wasn't a decision. It was just something I did. The road stretched out ahead of me like a blank canvas, offering nothing but space. I'd always loved the idea of escaping to somewhere new, where no one knew my name and I could start fresh. But the reality was messier than that. It wasn't as simple as driving away. It wasn't just about the physical distance between me and the life I was leaving behind. It was about everything I had to untangle in my own mind. By the time I found a place to stay, a small hotel on the outskirts of the city, I was exhausted. My phone was still in my bag, but I hadn't checked it yet. I had deliberately left it behind in the chaos of packing. I didn't want to hear from Mark. I didn't want to read his desperate messages, his empty apologies. I was done with excuses. I had given him more than enough chances. The hotel was basic, just a small room with peeling wallpaper and a bed that creaked whenever I moved, but it was mine, at least for now. There was a strange comfort in the quiet of the room, in the absence of everything I had left behind. It wasn't luxury or peace, but it was space, a rare sacred commodity in my life lately. As I sat on the edge of the bed, I felt a knot in my chest start to loosen. This was what freedom felt like, even if it was only temporary. For the first time in ages, I could breathe without worrying about whether I was going to upset someone, whether I was doing enough for Mark or what Megan needed. I could just be me. But even as the exhaustion crept over me, there was still a nagging voice in the back of my mind, one that wondered if I had done the right thing. I wasn't sure yet. I had to let the dust settle before I could process everything, but one thing was certain. I had done the hardest thing possible, and I had done it for myself. The days that followed were a blur. I spent them trying to find my footing, establishing a new routine, even if it was just temporary. I didn't call anyone. I didn't reach out to friends or family, not yet. There was no need for explanations, not yet. I wasn't ready to explain myself to anyone. I was still figuring out how to explain it to myself. I found a small job at a nearby cafe to keep myself occupied and make some money. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. It was mine. No one could take it from me. I worked the early shifts, just enough to cover my rent and keep myself moving forward. The work was simple, taking orders, making coffee, cleaning tables. But in those small, repetitive tasks, I found a kind of solace. It gave me something to focus on, something tangible to hold on to while I rebuilt my sense of self. A week later, when I felt I had enough space to think clearly, I finally checked my phone. The messages from Mark were overwhelming. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. They all read like the same thing. Apologies, explanations, promises. I listened to his voice on the voicemail, breaking with emotion as he begged me to come home. "Lena, please," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I know I messed up, but I can fix this. I can make it right." But I couldn't fix it. I had tried too many times to fix things that weren't broken, to patch up holes in a relationship that wasn't built on mutual respect and understanding. Mark had made his choice, and I had to make mine. The next day, I called him. I didn't want to do it over text. I needed to say it to his face. Well, over the phone at least. I needed to make him understand that this wasn't a fight I could walk back from. Mark, I started, my voice calm but firm. I'm not coming back. I can't. I don't know what I was hoping for, but I'm not that woman anymore. I can't keep making excuses for you, for Megan, or for myself. You drained our account. You drained my trust. I can't live like that anymore. I've worked too hard to let you both take everything. There was silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, struggling for words, but I wasn't going to let him interrupt me. You made your choice. You made her your priority, and I'm not going to stand in the way of that anymore. I've got my own life to live, Mark. A life I'm going to build for myself. You can't be part of it. Not in the way you were, not anymore. I hung up before he could say anything else. There was nothing left to say. I had made my decision, and it was time to stick to it. I didn't know what the future held, but I did know one thing for certain. I was no longer going to be someone's second choice. I was going to build a future where my needs came first, where my choices were mine and no one else's. And that, for the first time in years, felt like enough. The days began to stretch out into a rhythm I hadn't known in years. Small, quiet steps forward, each one a promise to myself that I wasn't going back. I had found something in the solitude of those early mornings. Peace. It was not the loud, brash kind of peace that I had imagined I would feel after making such a bold choice. No, this peace was quieter, more subtle. It was the kind that comes from knowing you've reclaimed your life, your choices, and your sense of self. The cafe job kept me busy, but it was more than that. It was a lifeline. I wasn't just serving coffee, I was serving myself, learning how to stand on my own, how to fill the void that had been left by Mark and the life I had walked away from. I started to see the beauty in the simplicity of my new existence. There were no arguments, no late-night confrontations, no more walking on eggshells trying to keep peace between Mark and his family. For the first time in a long while, I was just me. But of course, the reality of my new life wasn't without its challenges. I was still carrying the weight of the betrayal, still processing the anger and the hurt. I thought about the money he had spent, how I had worked so hard to save every penny, only to watch it slip away, not on our future, but on someone who would never value it. I thought about the silent promises Mark had made to me, the ones he had broken without a second thought. But as much as the anger burned in my chest, I knew I had to let it go. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, about taking control of my future. I was just starting to feel like I was settling into my new life when the unexpected happened. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the cafe was unusually quiet, the slow hum of background music the only sound filling the empty air. I had just finished wiping down the counter when the door jingled, and a familiar face stepped through. It wasn't Mark. Thankfully, he hadn't come looking for me, but it was someone I never expected to see. Megan. My heart skipped a beat, not from excitement, but from the sudden realization that my world was about to be turned upside down again. I had worked so hard to separate myself from Mark and his family, and here she was, standing in front of me, her eyes scanning the room before settling on me. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I should say anything, if I should just pretend I hadn't seen her and go about my business. But Megan wasn't the kind of person to just let things be. She was always the center of attention, always used to getting what she wanted. She made her way toward me, her heels clicking on the floor, her face perfectly composed. "Lena," she said, her tone polite, but there was something calculating behind her eyes. "I was hoping I could talk to you." I didn't know what to expect, but I knew this wasn't going to be a simple, "I'm sorry" conversation. I nodded curtly, my hand still resting on the counter, the clean rag in my grip. "I don't know what you're here for, Megan," I said evenly, my voice steady. "But if this is about Mark, I'm not interested in having that conversation." She smiled, but it was a tight, forced smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's not about Mark, not entirely. I just thought, well, I thought you and I should talk. I know things have been complicated between us, and I wanted to explain some things. Maybe clear the air?" I folded my arms, leaning against the counter, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Explain what, exactly?" That Mark's been draining our account for you, buying you gifts and vacations while we were trying to plan for our future? Is that what you want to clear up?" Her expression faltered for just a second, the facade of confidence slipping. But then she straightened up, shaking her head slightly. "It's not like that, Lena. It's complicated. You don't understand what it's like for me, being in this family. I have expectations to meet. I can't just live a normal life like you. Mark and we've always been close. He's always been there for me. And I didn't ask him to do all those things. He just wanted to help." I couldn't help but scoff at her words. "Help? By using my hard-earned money to spoil you? You didn't ask him. Maybe not directly, but you certainly never stopped him. You're just as guilty as he is in all of this, Megan. You've taken everything from me, from us. And for what? So you could live your little fairy tale while I stayed in the background?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her perfect mask. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice softer now, almost regretful. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I I didn't realize how much it was affecting you. I just, I don't know how to explain it. Mark's always been the one to fix things for me, and maybe that's why he's always put me first. I never realized how much it hurt you." I looked at her, taking in her carefully constructed vulnerability, the way she was trying to make herself the victim in this. She was good at this, at playing the part of someone who had been misunderstood. But I wasn't buying it. I wasn't the same woman who had let Mark and his family walk all over me anymore. I had learned the hard way that people will use your kindness as a weapon if you let them. "I don't need your apology, Megan," I said firmly. "What I need is for you to leave me alone. I've already lost enough to your family, and I'm done being part of your games. I'm taking control of my life now." Her eyes narrowed, a flash of something cold crossing her face. For a moment, I thought she might say something spiteful or try to manipulate me into feeling guilty, but then she just sighed. "Fine. If that's what you want, I can respect that. But don't think this is over, Lena. You can't just walk away from everything and expect it all to disappear." With that, she turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding in my chest. Her words lingered in the air, and for a moment I felt a flicker of doubt. Could I just walk away? Was it really that easy? But the answer was clear. Yes, I had walked away, and I wasn't going back. No matter what Megan or Mark thought, no matter how much they tried to make me feel guilty for choosing myself, I had made my decision. And this time, I wasn't looking back. The weight of the conversation with Megan hung in the air long after she left the cafe, but I refused to let it consume me. She didn't understand, not really. She didn't understand the pain of watching someone you love choose another person over you, time and time again, without a second thought. She didn't get that I had spent years silently sacrificing for a marriage that had never been truly equal. A marriage where I wasn't just an afterthought, but a convenient tool. She could say whatever she wanted, but I knew the truth. Mark had drained everything we had, and I wasn't about to let him, or her, hold any more power over me. The days that followed were quiet, but they were full of something new. Freedom. I wasn't sure when I had started feeling it, but I realized one day as I walked out of the cafe after my shift that I no longer felt the burden of guilt weighing on me. I had done what I had to do. I had chosen myself, and that was the hardest choice of all. For the first time in ages, I allowed myself to enjoy the small things. I took long walks by the lake, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and letting the cool breeze ruffle my hair. I started to feel like I could breathe again, like I was finally seeing the world with new eyes. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding from anyone or anything. I was building a life, step by step, that didn't depend on anyone else's validation or approval. But even as I built my new life, there were still moments when the past crept in. It wasn't just Mark or Megan I had to deal with. It was the echoes of the life I had left behind. The lies, the broken promises, the self-doubt that lingered even after I had walked away. One evening, a little over a month after I left, I was sitting in my small apartment, curled up with a cup of tea, when my phone buzzed on the table. I didn't need to check it to know who it was. Mark. I had been dreading this moment, but I had been expecting it too. He had tried calling a few times before, and I had let the calls go straight to voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk to him. Not yet. But tonight, something in me told me it was time. It was time to face him, to hear what he had to say after all these weeks. I took a deep breath before tapping the screen to connect the call. My heart was pounding in my chest as I heard the familiar voice crack through the speaker. Lena. Mark's voice was thick, almost hoarse, as though he hadn't slept in days. I've been trying to reach you. I know you're angry, but I need to explain. Please, just let me explain. I leaned back in the chair, my hands gripping the edges of the table. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Maybe more apologies, more empty promises. But I knew this conversation wasn't going to be the closure I had hoped for. It wasn't going to change anything. Not now. You don't get it, do you, Mark? I said, my voice quieter than I intended. You don't get that this isn't about you explaining yourself. It's about me understanding that I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending everything is okay when you've shown me, time and time again, that I'm not your priority. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, the kind that made the air feel heavy. I could almost picture him, pacing, desperate to fix things in a way that made sense to him but never really to me. I'm sorry, Lena, he said softly. I messed up, I know I did, but I was just trying to help. You have to believe that. No, Mark, I interrupted, my voice steady now. You weren't just trying to help. You were choosing her over me, over our future. You drained our savings, our future, because you couldn't say no to her. You didn't care about what we built. You didn't care about me. I do care, he said, his voice breaking. I care about you, I always have. I don't know what happened. It just got out of hand. Out of hand? I repeated bitterly. You didn't lose control, Mark. You just never cared enough to see what you were doing. You chose Megan over me, over our future. And you think a few words can fix that? Another long pause. This time I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't waiting for him to change. I was waiting for him to accept what I had already known, that we were done. Lena, I know I messed up, but please don't walk away, Mark said, his voice desperate now. Please don't let this be the end. I felt my chest tighten as I considered his words. It would have been so easy to go back, to give in to the pull of the familiar, to take him back, but I had come too far. I had fought for too long to reclaim my life, my worth, my future. I wasn't going to let him steal that from me again. I'm already gone, Mark, I said, my voice calm but unwavering. And you need to accept that. This isn't just about money or Megan. It's about respect, about trust, about what we've both allowed to happen. I'm done. I'm done trying to fix something that was never meant to be fixed. The line was silent for a long moment, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I felt a sense of finality. I was done, for good. When I hung up, I felt nothing but a quiet relief. I had said my piece. I had done everything I could. And now it was time to move forward. The days that followed were a blur of quiet victory. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic moments. There was only the steady rhythm of life, moving forward. Slowly, the weight of Mark and his family's manipulation started to lift from my shoulders. It wasn't easy, but with every passing day I felt stronger, more whole. I began to see the possibilities again, the things I had once dreamed about but had shelved for a future I no longer wanted. I applied for a new job, one that felt like a fresh start, one that wasn't tainted by the past. I started thinking about the things I wanted to do with my life, not the things I thought I had to do to make someone else happy. I allowed myself to imagine a future that was entirely my own, without the strings of guilt and obligation tying me down. And then, one day, I got an email. It was from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years, someone I had almost forgotten about during the madness of my marriage. They were offering me an opportunity, a chance to work on something I had always wanted to do, but never had the time for. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. It was a small step, but it felt like a giant leap. A leap into a future where I didn't have to apologize for wanting more. A future where my worth wasn't defined by anyone else's expectations. I never saw Mark again, and honestly, I didn't need to. My life wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, and that was enough. As I packed my things for the new job, for the new life I was starting, I thought back to the day I left, to the moment I walked out that door and chose myself. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it had been the best choice I'd ever made. I had walked away from everything, but in the end, I had gained so much more.